Okay, I'm continuing from right where I left off from the previous exercise. So we just pasted in our Illustrator content as a smart object. Now, a couple of bizarre things happen here. First of all of the content appears inside a frame, and this frame behaves pretty much exactly the same way as our free transform frame behaves. And the other thing that happens is we get a new layer inside our Photoshop file. We now have a vector smart object layer. Now, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to bring my cursor outside of the frame and I'm going to rotate my text around, something like this. And essentially what I'm trying to do is I want to have my text sort of arc around the top of my layout, something like this, right? And maybe I'll scale it in just a little bit. I'm holding down Shift and Alt or Shift and Option here on the Mac. And of course I can use my arrow keys to sort of nudge it around, something like this. I'm going to have to scale it in a little bit more. Again, using Option and Shift or Alt and Shift. Something like that looks pretty good. Bring it around just a bit more. There we go. Now, what's cool here is once you get it sitting exactly where you want and you hit Enter, that will lock in your changes. But what's cool here is you can always go back and manipulate this vector content from Illustrator. If you know about vector and raster, you know that vector content or vector material can always be scaled and manipulated and resized, and it will always maintain its quality, which means I can go back into that free transform frame just by hitting Command T or Control T, and I could continue scaling and rotating and manipulating this Illustrator content without losing its quality, which is huge, right? I'm just going to hit escape here, though. I want to show you the other big deal behind smart objects with Photoshop and Illustrator. So I'm looking at my text, and it looks pretty good, but it's a little bit too big, isn't it? The font size that I've used. I want to reduce down the font size. So here's what I'm going to do. We have this new Vector Smart Object layer, which I've already pointed out, but notice we have this weird oddball-looking icon right down in the bottom corner of the layer thumbnail, right? Go ahead and double click on that icon. We get this really cryptic message from Photoshop. Photoshop says, after editing the contents, choose File Save to commit the changes. Those changes will be reflected upon returning to Jeff's diskdesign.psd. The file must be saved to the same location. If the Save As dialog box appears, choose Cancel, then flatten the image before saving. And I'm sitting here going, what does all that mean? I have no idea what this means. Essentially what it means is Illustrator is about to kick in. We're going to get flipped over to Illustrator. We can make whatever changes we want over inside Illustrator. And then once we're done making our changes, we're going to choose File Save. And then essentially what's going to happen is Illustrator is going to boot us back over into Photoshop where we'll see our changes. All right, sit tight. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to go ahead and click on OK, and I'm thrown back into Illustrator. But what's really weird is I'm inside a new file inside Illustrator called vectorsmartobject2.ai, which is a little weird. There's my original Illustrator file that you and I created together. Don't edit this guy, edit the vector smart object file. That's the guy that we want. It's kind of weird. Okay, I'm going to click on this guy here. In fact, I'm going to double click on this guy to get into my text here. I'll hit Command A or Control A to select all. And I want to go and change the size of my text. So I'm going to click on Character here up on Illustrator's options bar. And I'm going to reduce down the size of my text down to about 10 point. There we go, something like that. Okay, back to my Move tool inside Illustrator. Remember that cryptic warning inside Photoshop told us to save the file after we made our changes. So I'll simply hit Command S here or Control S over on the Windows side, but nothing really seems to happen, right? Head back to Photoshop, and as soon as we head back to Photoshop, our text gets updated. I don't know if you caught that or not. You may want to try this a couple of times just to get the feel for it. So again, go and double click on that icon inside the layer inside Photoshop, the layers palettes, and head back to Illustrator, make another change, and then save it, and then come back to Photoshop, and you'll see that change. It happens really quickly, but our text is now 10 point in size, not 12, which it originally was. So, but things have shifted here a little bit inside my layout, so I'm going to hit Command T or Control T, and what I'm going to do is essentially try and reset my text so that it's arcing across the top of my layout nice and evenly, maybe something like this, right? Hit Enter to lock in those changes.